Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kate Lipper-Garabedian, State Representative for the 32nd Middlesex District, which includes Melrose, Wakefield, and Malden. Among my committee assignments this session, I'm the House Vice Chair of the Joint Committee on Elder Affairs. I'm also a former middle school public school teacher and education attorney for more than a decade, and the mom to two young boys, if you can't tell from the background here. I'm glad to be your host and your moderator for a timely discussion as we all work intentionally to create a positive new year. In elevating this virtual environment, we're bringing together diverse people in diverse spaces. I want to acknowledge those joining us and watching from the 32nd Middlesex District, as well as those from around the Commonwealth. So I officially welcome you to my 7th Community Conversation event. Tonight's theme is lifelong learning, cultivating a holistic new year. And the goal of my panel is to inspire and connect you with opportunities for the pursuit of knowledge and experiences that enhance social inclusion, active citizenship, and personal development. So with that, let's quickly review our time together. We'll organize the discussion tonight first with a brief introduction on the panelists. I'll then provide some opening remarks to establish the context for our conversation. Thereafter, we'll have a roundtable discussion with some questions that were framed and submitted by attendees and those that arise organically. And finally, I'll invite each of the panelists to share out some individual reflections. So I'm so elated to host such an accomplished group and to elevate their work and leadership tonight. I want to acknowledge each of you for your commitment to serving our communities. Debbie Amaral is the 18th and first woman Chief Executive Officer of the Mystic Valley YMCA, taking on that role in 2011, serving Malden, Medford, and Everett. Under her leadership, the Mystic Valley YMCA has been a leader in supporting youth and residents in its communities. For example, in February 2020, Debbie led the WISE partnership with the Greater Boston Food Bank and Walnut Street Center to open a food pantry in Medford called the Mystic Community Market. Debbie served on the Salem School Committee, is currently the chair of the Salem Parks and Recreation Commission, and is a board member of the Greater Boston Food Bank. She has been a foster parent to 7 children, including her youngest, who is now 15. Michael Bobbitt is the executive director of the Mass Cultural Council. He's an award-winning theater director and choreographer working nationally and internationally, and a published playwright who has dedicated his professional career to arts leadership. Michael serves on the New England Foundation for the Arts Board of Directors and the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies Boards of Directors, and was selected for Art Equity's BIPOC Leadership Circle. Catherine McDonald is the library director of the Lucius Beebe Memorial Library in Wakefield, after serving as the assistant director for nearly 7 years and the library's administrative assistant for 10. Over that time, she earned her master's degree in library and information science from Simmons College. Especially during the pandemic, Catherine has played an integral role in providing and connecting critical learning opportunities, resources, and professional opportunities to community members. Lisa Lewis is the program and volunteer coordinator of The Bridge, a school community partnership that recruits, screens, trains, and places volunteers in the Melrose Public Schools. She works to create critical learning opportunities that connect Melrose students and adult residents, including over the course of the pandemic. And finally, Rachael Coredella currently serves as the Melrose Council on Aging licensed clinical social worker. With over 10 years of experience in social work, Rachael connects residents to available local, state, and federal benefits and resources, including SNAP, fuel assistance, housing supports, water and sewer discounts, mental health referrals, and school supply programs. So I'm just so grateful for each of you being with me tonight, and I know I'm going to learn a lot in this conversation. So as we start this new year, it's an opportunity to invest in ourselves and consider ways to strengthen our well-being and our connections in our communities. This may be particularly important as we're nearing the 2-year mark of living in a global pandemic that has disrupted our way of life. Since the start of COVID-19, research suggests that 1 in 2 Americans say they have been dealing with stress or anxiety. In my circle, I think it's a little higher than 1 in 2. I don't know about in yours. The pandemic occurred at a time when many of us already were working to address mental health and substance abuse challenges. You know, the CDC has taken a survey since the beginning of the pandemic to see how it's affecting people. About 30 to 40% of Massachusetts participants have suggested that they are experiencing some sort of anxiety or depression. Women, younger people, people with fewer years of formal education, and members of communities of color are more likely to report having mental health issues related to COVID-19. I've been maintaining and updating a collection of mental health and personal well-being resources on my website at kateforrep.com/COVID-19. Last April, I hosted a community conversation event specifically on mental health that you can reference on my YouTube channel. Our conversation today really centers on how we can commit to opportunities in 2022 that strengthen our overall well-being and engage in practices and outlets that will cultivate a more holistic 2022. And I want to note that if you or someone you care about is experiencing a mental health crisis, it's really critical to reach out and explore opportunities with a clinical professional for support. I know that Rachael can speak a little bit about some of the practices we can work on at home and also ways in which to connect as well with other external supports. Research suggests that 40% of our happiness is determined not by our genes, but by our daily activities. So if we're starting to think in this first week of February about a roadmap for the rest of 2022 and really investing in holistic experiences, there are various strategies that you might pursue to enhance life satisfaction. And I know each of our panelists today can speak to at least one of these. So one is around physical activity. Of course, when you think about New Year's resolutions, many of those are anchored in physical health and fitness goals. And in addition to increasing your longevity and boosting your confidence, an easy way to supercharge learning is to exercise. Physical activity helps us grow new brain cells and neurotransmitters. It's also been shown to improve long-term memory and reverse age-related declines in brain function. In fact, walking just 11 minutes a day is enough to reap some benefits. And I know Debbie can speak a lot about the importance of physical activity in the new year. Arts and culture is another really important consideration in your 2022 roadmap. In education, we know that students, and I remember reading about this as a teacher myself, that students who are studying the arts end up really reaping benefits in the classroom. That engagement with just going to theater during the year has shown to have causal relationships with how they're doing in the other coursework that they're taking and their persistence through school. And this is included in studies that have been cited by the Mass Cultural Council. For adults, participation in arts and cultural activity is increasingly associated with improved health and well-being, stimulated neural activity, stress reduction, and healthier aging. Recently, doctors started prescribing museum visits as a way to manage ailments ranging from anxiety to eating disorders to chronic pain. And I know Michael will be able to talk a lot about the arts and culture sector here in the state, not only for people who are creatively inclined, but those who just can really benefit from experiencing various art and music and culture activities. For another thing to think about in your goals for 2022 is what else might you want to learn or dig more deeply into? And the Pew Research Center has found that 87% of adults in the workforce acknowledge it's essential for them to get training and develop new skills throughout their careers to keep up with both their professional goals and their life pursuits of learning. Massachusetts has been called the Athens of America, where knowledge and innovation flourish. And the Massachusetts library system is a critical component of that, providing services throughout the Commonwealth. Our libraries have adapted to serve us, especially now in response to the pandemic, and have provided necessary spaces for internet connectivity, for job and career development, and for the critical reminder that you're never alone, whether you're engaging with a book or with neighbors and library programming. And Catherine, I'm glad you'll be able to talk more about that. And finally, as another strategy for thinking about 2022, we should consider the really beneficial effects of volunteering on health outcomes. Research has found that volunteering and civic engagement is significantly predictive of better mental and physical health, life satisfaction, self-esteem, and lower depressive symptoms and psychological distress. Community service allows us to expand beyond the corners of our rooms and seek out connectivity with a greater purpose. And Lisa can speak a lot to that, including the type of volunteerism that allows you to develop intergenerational connections. I'm so excited to hear from our panelists today on these interconnected components to a 2022 roadmap that supports living fuller, more integrated lives. Research unsurprisingly demonstrates that those who invest more effort into new habits see greater improvements in their well-being. So before we turn to an open panel discussion, I also want to acknowledge at the outset that 2022 is still going to be something of a pandemic year. COVID-19 continues to have sobering implications as we set the context for owning our personal development. And at the same time, there's certainly action being taken, including through state and federal legislation, to address many of these challenges and to support our communities. One example that I just want to quickly highlight is the legislature's recent $4 billion COVID-19 recovery law. The governor signed that in December. It includes significant investments consistent with addressing a holistic new year and supporting mental health and well-being, community services, and arts and culture. I won't go through all of the targeted investments, but let me just raise up a few. There are $400 million invested in behavioral health and substance use disorder programs, $60 million for the Mass Cultural Council to help institutions and artists statewide through grant programming, which builds on a historic $21 million already budgeted to MCC this year. $27 million to cities, towns, nonprofits for local tourism and cultural economies, $12.3 million for education initiatives, another $107 million for workforce skills training programs, including adult basic education courses and English for English learners, $100 million for capital needs for existing vocational and career and technical education programs. So there's just great opportunity to use these and other assets across the Commonwealth to shift our awareness and our practices to honor ourselves and our communities. I'm excited to continue these efforts in the State House in the new year, and I'm certainly grateful for your ongoing collaboration, partnership, and support. So now I want to open things up for a roundtable discussion with our wonderful panelists. I will have you each to sort of jump in and share thoughts on some of the questions that we've heard from interested attendees and others in the community. So let's start with this idea that here we are in a new year. It's an opportunity to really set goals for individual growth. As James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, has shared, if we do not raise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. So I'd love to hear from you all about personal practices that you utilize and sustain for your pursuit of your own growth and development. And what are ways in which you're looking to learn at this point in your life, including within the context of the work in which you lead? So I'll let anyone take it from there. And if needed, I can call on someone.
I will start with that because I think what I would like to put out first is that since we're, still within a pandemic, as we look at goals for the new year, we want to really consider joy and cutting ourselves a lot of slack. This might not be the year to take up the clarinet, but it might be the year to maybe do the ukulele. And I had read a book, I read from time to time, and one of the quotes that was in it is that despair is not a great motivator, but hope is. And I think that hope comes from optimism and a certain amount of faith in yourself. So I don't know about the things that I will be learning this year. I think I learn something new every single day. It's part of what I have to do. But as I said, I am looking to have a little bit more joy in my life. And one thing that has been consistent throughout my life since my 20s is that I always have a component of sort of meditation or biofeedback or something that reboots my brain. So that too is like health, wellness, being kind to yourself.
That's really great, Catherine. Thank you. Rachael, could you pick up on that a little bit in terms of that and for the ways in which, Catherine was speaking about personal components of mindfulness or gratitude and how that can be a really important consideration for people as they plan out their next year?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that sort of came to mind when Catherine was talking is this sort of theory of positive psychological interventions. And I was going to speak about that a little bit later, but it really brings up a good point when you are setting goals and setting intentions is to make them realistic. And like Catherine said about, picking up a new instrument, don't choose the hardest one that you have no experience with, build on something that or that you're interested in so that you can achieve it and be successful. And of course, it's great to push yourself and to challenge yourself with new things, but, really focus on your strengths, focus on your past achievements, and kind of use those to set the goals and set the intentions going forward. Use what's going well in your life, what's going well in your world, and be able to kind of build on that to set a goal that is optimistic and realistic. So I guess personally, that's important to me because I feel like it's so easy to start something and stop because it's too hard. You know, you're not going, if you want to start getting in shape, your first goal is not going to be a marathon. Your first goal is going to be a mile. Your second goal might be a 5K, you know, that kind of thing. Because I think we've all been there where we set a goal that's completely unrealistic in the time frame that we're looking at. And then you're like, well, I can't do this anyway. I'm just going to kind of throw in the towel. If you do something smaller steps or something that has a realistic end goal, then you're much more likely to stick with it as you see those little successes along the way.
Debbie, can you pick up on that? Because when I hear mile and running, of course, I think about the YMCA and the work that you do supporting your members and the larger community.
So first of all, I want to admit that I'm chubby. And, you know, with that being said, I think there's and I work out every day in some way, but I think that, you know, some important points are, one is just to add to Catherine. I think also if we all practice some kindness to each other and kindness to ourselves. I think we're really hard on ourselves, especially we're all hard on ourselves, whether it's the way we look, the way we feel. You can be chubby and be in great health. I can lift 60 pounds of rice every single day and serve 200 people food at one of our markets. Because I'm chubby doesn't make me unhealthy. And if I want to make a change, I really believe it has to be something I love doing. Like if I don't like running, I shouldn't run, but maybe I can do some yoga practice, or maybe I can do walking. You said walking 11 minutes a day. That's fantastic. And the other thing I would just say is that our practice of gratitude, you know, and I think Catherine mentioned that too. Find 3 things that you were grateful for the prior day, just little things. Like, you know, I was grateful that my daughter got up on time this morning, and I got to work 5 minutes earlier. That was exciting to me, but it's a gratitude practice. You don't have to look for the big things, look for the little wins. And, you know, I think a lot of it is about really doing things that you like to do. You know, finding a book you love to listen to, even if it's a trashy novel, as you do your walk, so that you're just enjoying and the time just goes by. But just walking your dog, spending time, you know, I saw a dog doing yoga on YouTube the other day. Like, that's fantastic if your dog can pick that up. But it's just like, really, don't be so hard on yourself. Be kind.
It's really important. Michael, yes, I saw you were wanting to jump in.
Thank you so much, Rep, for having me here. This is such an important room to be in. And I'm so glad you highlighted some of the benefits of incorporating the arts into your sort of mental health practice, because there is so much research and so much studying about this. This was at one point called art therapy, and people went to school to get degrees in being art therapists. It was all about integrating the arts into a healing practice. And I'm so glad to hear references to clarinet and ukulele and reading books, because that is all art. And many of us survived the quarantine and even the last couple of years by really digging into things that we may not think of as art. I'm pretty sure I finished Netflix at some point in 2020, but like the podcasts and stuff. And one of the great things about my job is I get to be around art and artists all the time. And because I'm an artist, I've learned to sort of think internally about things, and that has helped me to sort of stay healthy. I'm a bit of a nut when it comes to self-care. And when things get extremely stressful, I actually go deeper into my self-care practice. So I work out with a trainer or a spin class 7 days a week. I get up in the morning, do a little bit of mindfulness and meditation. I have a really intensive gratitude practice. I have a beaded bracelet on my nightstand at home, and I touch each bead and name something I'm grateful for, which forces me to name 40 things I'm grateful for. which is a lot. So I have to actually sort of be open to things coming in that make me happy, that make me grateful during the day. This year, I'm excited about this year. I have a bunch of big things happening. One, I get to have my my honeymoon that has been postponed for 2 years. So I'm going to Cartagena, which is very exciting. My son turns 21. I turned 50. So these are big sort of days. And then right before this, I came from a reading of my new musical. So I'm like bouncing off the walls. I adapted, you all should know this book, but I adapted Make Way for Ducklings into a musical. And there's going to be a premiere in the DC area and then another one, hopefully in the summer here. So like, I'm just surrounded by joy. And the last thing I want to say, and I'll put a thing in the link, but there was a movement in London called cultural prescription, whereby they're pushing sort of doctors and medical providers to write prescriptions, not for medication, but for culture. So if you want to move more, if you need to move more because of some ailment or something you're working on, they would prescribe a dance class, or as you mentioned in your intro, prescribe going to a museum or going to see a play or a comedy routine. These are kind of things. And so Mass Cultural Council has been working on a pilot for the last couple of years. We don't know where it's going to go. Hopefully we can sell this idea to insurance providers so that it can become something that they are reimbursing in their packet. But it's a great way to heal that doesn't require medication.
That's great. And hearing your really incredible personal practices to support your passion and your well-being, I'm also thinking of, I'm sure each of the other esteemed panelists similarly have really strong self-care practices as well. And at the same time, if someone's watching from home, or maybe someone like me who doesn't have a beads of 40 beads every night that you're going through, which is incredible. I'm guessing that's not right where you started, right, Michael? My sense is you mentioned, this has been a process to get to the point where you are. Is that fair? Is that a fair thing to expect?
Yeah, in the beginning, I started this practice about 7 years ago. And in the beginning, it was hard to come up with things. I don't know if I was in a dark place in my life, but it was just hard to think of things to be grateful for. But I forced myself to stick to that practice even back then. And so sometimes it was the wind on my face or the dog with the floppy ears. But what happened over time was that I would notice the world around me. I would notice those things so I can put them in my gratitude bank. And that all of a sudden made me see the world as this positive place to live, even in the midst of all that we're going through with COVID, with the racial reckoning, with the political unrest, everything that's happening. I'm able to maintain a space of content and happiness in all this darkness because of that gratitude practice.
Well, that's good. And I take personal comfort in that because I started working on a gratitude journal of sorts at some point last year, having read that it does really support you broadly. It can make a real difference. And admittedly, I don't get it done every day, but my lovely office mates here who are joining us tonight, one of them mentioned, well, you don't always have to write it down. If you even just think it through, that counts too. So it's good, to Catherine's point earlier and Rachel's as well, to be kind to yourself and to celebrate the work that you are doing and being intentional about. Lisa, what about you? What are some things you'd want you're thinking about in the new year, you'd want other people to be thinking about in terms of incorporating goals and setting expectations?
I would definitely circle back to where Catherine started us off as well with, I read this quote that you guys sent about if we don't raise to the level of our goals, then we fall to the level of our systems. And I said, I had to laugh at myself because I'm definitely a fall to the level of my systems, which is pretty low kind of person. But thankfully I dream pretty high. And so I feel like I kind of even out in the middle. And right now, especially in this time that we're living in, I feel like it has to be okay to be okay. Right. And if we can get to a level of that's good, that's great. And we should not be striving for perfect right now. I mean, maybe never, but like striving for perfection sometimes just gets in the way of doing good or being good. And as for personal practices, I'm definitely a fly by the seat of my pants kind of person. Like I don't have great personal practices to share. I kind of wish I did. It's making me think about what I should be doing going forward. But I'm also definitely a say yes to the dress kind of person. Like if there's something great to be done, I want to be a part of it. So I'm not afraid to dive in and volunteer, or if I have an idea, I'll throw it out there and see if it sticks, if there's interest in it. And I would just say to people, if there's something you're interested in doing, give it a shot, see what happens, give it a try. And my other big takeaway from this was, is to follow your sense of curiosity. I definitely am a curious person, and I feel like when I follow that curiosity, it generally takes me somewhere good, whether it's even just reading an article, something as small as that, or a book or something else, and learning something new, or if it's bigger and it's sort of well, I'm curious, if I tried this new initiative, would it be beneficial, and following it and having it turn into something that is bigger. So even the little small bits of following your curiosity, it really can make you happier too. You might find something new that you're passionate about.
Can I stick with you for a minute and talk a little bit about applying that to your role as, coordinating all of these volunteer opportunities for people in the community? And, maybe people come to you and say, well, I've got some time, but I'm not really sure if I'm the right fit for this job, or, I've never worked with kids before. I'm sure you've heard a lot of different sort of, concerns or sort of hesitations about getting involved in this particular volunteer experience, or maybe in others. And can we stick with that just a little bit? And for people who are watching and thinking, what might I do to be involved in the community to both, make my neighborhoods better, but also it might be really good for me individually. How do you sort of work with people who are exploring this possibility, and what's some advice you might give to people considering?
Yeah, I think in terms of volunteering, I think about what you're interested in yourself. So what are you curious about? What are you passionate about? What are you interested in? So if someone came to me in my position at the schools and said, I'm interested and passionate about art, for example, then I would talk to them, get a little feel for like an age group that they're interested in. Some people don't like working with little kids. Some people don't like working with high schoolers. All great. But if they're interested in working in art, then we can match them up with some art teachers and see if they either need help just with getting supplies ready, or help working with students on specific skills if they're a more advanced artist, all those kinds of things. So I think it's really, my advice would be to find something that you're interested in and then reach out in those areas. If you are, say, a cook and you really love cooking or you love food, talk to one of the food pantries. If you really love to cook, make meals for Bread of Life in Malden. So there's a lot of different ways to take your curiosity or things that make you happy and then take it and share it with others. And getting involved like that, it just builds that the sort of bonds of our community that really do make us happier. I mean, research shows that, as you said before, research really shows that being embedded in community and strong community bonds really do make us happier.
Sure. So Lisa, I appreciate you sort of thinking about, first steps for someone who, wherever they might be living and watching, how they might consider their own, interests or skill sets, and how that might fit with a particular community-based organization where they might work. For others who are here, one, I think, hindrance to people really reaching out or getting involved is not knowing exactly where to start. So what are some ways in which people can access, the world in which you sort of live as an expert, whether that's arts and culture or the library? What is the library offering, and how would people sort of learn first about that? Or Debbie, in terms of the different opportunities that a YMCA provides in addition to and beyond just exercise, right? There's a lot that's going on there. I know as a Y member, Rachael, for people who maybe have some basic needs in the community that they need to get addressed, where would they start? And so any of you could jump in and sort of discuss sort of next steps. Catherine,
well, this is a great segue into something that we just started working on. We had a grant last year, and we had discovered that people are really interested in volunteering. They want to do it. They want to make connections. If they can't volunteer, they want to join clubs and groups. And as you said, it has so many benefits. And our grant was to have an event where people could meet, because I think when you meet with people and you get to talk, and so much more comes about. But with the pandemic, we weren't able to do that. So we put it on a website, and the Wakefield Public Library has a website called Join in Wakefield. And anybody who has a group or a volunteer opportunity can fill out a little form, and it gets posted on this website. And if you're interested in volunteering, you can look at the whole list and see what might work for you. So we've had such good luck with this that we'll tell other libraries about it. We all share our information. And other people will probably start doing it too, because it's high demand. The information is, people are looking for it, and it's that matching that's so important. The match is so important. Yeah. And as you had said, try it, and then if it doesn't work, try something else. But it's wonderful that it's there, and that there are lots of opportunities. So don't give up looking. And start at the library. Call your local library, call the reference department, and they'll have connections, and they'll pass you on.
Great.
I think that's an excellent point. At the Y, I think people, when you've seen one Y, you've seen one Y, and that's kind of our saying. So at the Mystic Valley YMCA, we have done over 2,000 vaccination shots since mid-December, with many, many people from Melrose that come in with their kids, because it's warm, quick, and fast. And why I mentioned that is we have a volunteer that kind of picked us out of the weeds, and volunteers every Saturday to help people go get their shots. A little bit older, and he's was a retired person from the Veterans Administration, and just wants to do that. We have, and I don't think people know this either, we have 3 locations. We call them markets, but food pantries. We serve over 2,000 people a week, probably about households, not people, households a week, with about 3 people in the household. In Malden alone, we probably serve about 900 a week households. And so we have about 25 volunteers working at the sites. And so it's anything from packing bags to checking people in, or just like cleaning up afterwards and just chit-chatting. We have a lot of retired people, but also we have a lot of people picking up food. Sometimes it's just for the conversation. So sure. I think that there's places that people can fit into volunteerism, that they don't have to be right next to each other. And I also want to say, if people go to our Facebook pages, they'll see my wellness director, Diego, doing exercises. And the thing about Diego is, not only does he help people lose weight if they want to, but he connects people, and people laugh, and people have joy. And I think that's equally important. And, one of our youth programs in Medford is under the Chevalier Theater. And so I can't thank the Mass Cultural Connection enough. I mean, to have a group like this together with all the different resources and connections, hopefully, if nothing else, the pandemic taught us that we need to kind of figure out how to join together, whether it's virtually like this or in person. And thank you, Rep. Kate. We're about to have a refrigerated truck that can be more flexible for food and get to more neighborhoods. So it's all so important.
Thank you, Debbie.
I read somewhere that nothing brings people together more than art and food. So
perfect. Here we are.
Yeah, here we are. But it's so great to see you all uplifting art, because I do think it's a big, huge part of our society, and so much of art can help so many different sectors and some of the society's toughest problems. But organizations need front of house staff, ushers, people to pass out playbills, board members, always looking for board members. I also would challenge you to consider forming like groups of people that go to various arts events around town. The Commonwealth has so many free opportunities, which are really nice, but certainly arts right now, considering the massive shutdown we've had. Thank you so much for the $60 million, Rep. But considering all the shutdowns we've had, certainly anyone that can afford to pay for a ticket even if it's a virtual ticket, would be really great to support those groups. But there's so many opportunities. Gather together, come up with a group of people, and go consume art together. It's a great way to do some healing too.
I love that idea. One of the other components of exercise and goal setting for the year is thinking about nature and being outside for some of the opportunities of community building or exercise or just, mindfulness. And there's a podcast that we are going to have available soon with Friends of the Fells, the executive director. They're talking about how they created walking groups during COVID. And it's been hugely successful because we haven't been able to be in the same communal way that human beings, of the 21st century want to be. So, Michael, that's a great idea to think about ways to experience art and culture with others and build community that way also. I love that idea. Yeah. Something that I think maybe, was it Debbie you said about sort of the pandemic has taught us how we need to be connected, and maybe I stole that from someone else, but I think it was you. I mean, let's turn to that just a little bit before I open it up to each of you to have a little bit of your own, time to talk. What are ways in which maybe the world in which you work and lead and have had to shift during the pandemic? And are there things as we enter, upcoming the third sort of year of this, albeit perhaps with more information and a little bit more certainty, are there successes that you've seen that we might continue moving forward, that we want to hold up and elevate and consider, on an individual level as we progress through 2022? And I'll also add one more thing. I'll also add, and then we'll go to you, Rachael. One of the questions we heard from an attendee is, how can I sort of set goals in these spaces, or how, maybe not I, but how can homebound people set, so there may be people who have limitations on mobility or perhaps are immunocompromised right now, in which case it's really not safe for them to go to a museum. We have learned some really maybe silver linings around ways to nonetheless integrate ourselves through software like this and other opportunities. What are some things we can take from our learning so far in COVID to really improve on this year and create a holistic 2022? Rachael?
I think specifically to the older adults in the community, the pandemic was incredibly challenging. Many of them had difficulty getting out anyway. And now when you can't go out, it's really been really difficult. Also in Melrose, the Milano Center is still closed. So we don't have a gathering place to do any sort of safe activities. And with the Omicron surge, we also had to cut back on the limited in-person activities that we were doing. I think one thing that became really apparent is that the older adults need better access to technology. We were able to do, I say we, but it was really the team that I work with, because I hadn't actually started there yet. But they were able to move bingo online and onto the telephone. They were able to provide Zoom lessons. I know that there's a group over at Melrose Wakefield Hospital that was doing kind of one-on-one Zoom instructions so that you could keep in touch with people. My father in his 70s was teaching my 8-year-old to play guitar over Zoom. So I think that technology became important in a way for older adults that it hadn't been previously. So I think just continuing to get that access, devices specifically, but also the education, to be able to use that technology. I think audiobooks are incredible for older adults, but the access is often difficult.
Yes.
So I think going forward, we need to kind of keep that in mind as we say, like, wow, this is great. We can connect on Zoom, or we can do this virtually. There's a large segment of people that just don't know how to do that. So getting that to those people in particular, but also, people that may have a hard time buying a computer or buying an iPhone or something like that, to make it a little bit more equitable and accessible for people.
Thank you for holding that up. That's really important. And there's probably volunteer opportunities for people who are more technologically adept to be connected with folks. So that could be for people who are looking for ways to give and to make these connections. This could be a really important one in the coming year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the cultural sector is stepping up its game, and we were forced to move everything online, and we were scrambling, thinking that the digital world was going to be a stopgap. But we're learning it's now needs to be incorporated into our business model. So the great thing about the digital world is everyone gets a front row seat. So the accessibility and the equity in that is amazing. And I think what's happening in the cultural sector, people are starting to invest more in software and content providers and people that really understand the digital medium to see how the live experience can integrate more fully with the digital experience. Because as we all know, that when we make advances in technology, we don't usually go back. I don't know many people out there using their iPod Touch and 8 tracks, right? We keep going forward. And I think some people are looking at what happened in the sporting industry when sports started streaming into people's homes. It became a visceral experience. In addition to being able to see the game up close and personal, you get to do slow-mo, instant replay, colorful commentary in your ears, data scrolls, bio pop-up, someone writing on the screens. And so now I think the cultural sector is thinking, what can we do to make that experience of consuming art more interactive? So I'm excited about what's going to go. Always trying to raise money to make sure I can fund some digital innovation. I'll be coming back to you, Rep, for that. Okay. But I think those are the kind of things that are going to make the experience of if you can't or don't feel safe leaving your home, how can we bring you these really great experiences from your computer or your phone?
Excellent. Catherine, I'm thinking the library had to do some of that, right? Pivoting.
Yeah. Libraries are keenly aware of the digital divide. And we spend a lot of time trying to find ways to connect people, the people who are left behind. So just about every library has a friends group that purchases museum passes so that people who maybe otherwise couldn't bring an entire family to a museum can get a pass and have access to that. So now a lot of these things are digital and people maybe don't have, and I know we often go to, it's older people who maybe are not savvy or don't have the equipment, but it's not really just older people. It's surprising. And in Wakefield, in fact, Wakefield has a lot of early adopters and very tech savvy people, but there are whole bunches of people who are left out. Either they don't have Wi-Fi or they don't have the equipment. So many libraries in Massachusetts now have hotspots, and that came through a federal program that we have hotspots in Chromebooks. And, if we can get the stuff to people, the tricky part is that they need help setting it up, and they need the kind of one-on-one. That's where you can really use a volunteer. But right. we have done, it's hard to do a class on Zoom when you have to get the people on Zoom.
That's true.
Right. So there's been a lot of very funny Zoom meetings trying to get people on Zoom. But as we can be together a little bit more, we reach out and try to get more and more people not to be left behind. And in Wakefield, we do work interdepartmentally. So I work with the senior center and I work with the police department, and we try to do what we can to identify needs. But I would really encourage people who are looking for ways to connect to, every town has a library. Call your local library and someone will connect you with what you need. We have homebound services where volunteers deliver goods to people. You don't have to come in. So there's a lot more there than people recognize. So don't hesitate to call. and find out and just tell people what you need. We can start something new if you tell us that that's what your need is.
That's great. In all of your commentary, I've heard hints of, recognition of the way in which policymakers can support your organization's work and be mindful of constituents' needs. And so, would love to give an opportunity for any additional thoughts that you would have in terms of how can policymakers support opportunities to help people, to make sure that they have access within their community to the programs and supports that they really rely on to flourish. So we've talked some about maybe some local investments that we've made, and obviously, Catherine, you mentioned federal grant money for the hotspots. Michael, you've referenced some of the state support for the grants making that you all do and other programming. Anything else you'd want policymakers to be thinking about into 2022 as we continue in this pandemic, but as we also look for, opportunities just broadly outside of the pandemic even to support, holistic life experiences for people across the Commonwealth?
From the WISE perspective, I would say two things. One is every year we get a youth at risk grant, and this year we're going to ask for our biggest one ever. And for the Y, for our Y, we actually directly give it to our housing development community centers. We have 2 in Malden and 2 in Medford, and one that's it's a digital music studio that we can do remotely or in person. And why that's important is to have a drop-in center for kids of low means to just come and just have a caring adult and be able to do their homework and just get some support. We can't wait for the tough graduate students to come back and do some projects with them. But that's huge, and that's our Y just splits it up between the 3 so that we can the 5 so that we can support them.
As a former teacher, that's near and dear to my heart. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one is I think that we always all have to remember that right now the not-for-profits are pretty secure because of the fact that we've had some funding that has been very supportive of keeping us going. But I think as we look at late 2022, early 2023, I think we're going to have to look at what supports are needed. I know that early childhood education is going to have a commission report coming out. It's hard. Getting people to work in early childhood is hard. Even as a person who, we were planning to do 250,000 pounds of food a year, going up to 500,000 pounds of food with the Greater Boston Food Bank. We did 2.5 million last year. So when you think about that growth, it's going to be hard to maintain, but we have to because food stamps just got cut back again. So I think that there's lots of room for the Commonwealth to think about our increased tax revenues that have been incurred this year and where it will make the biggest bang for its bucks as far as, connecting people and making sure that people have their basic needs met and making sure that we keep some of the not-for-profits just, functioning. I know a lot of the theaters, a lot of the, the programs we're doing need that support.
Thank you, Debbie. And I'll also just flag that my community conversation in the fall of last year was around early childhood and education, also available on the YouTube channel. Very important. Well, why don't I ask, I'm mindful of the time. We're coming up on the hour, and I want to give each of you a chance to just share any final impressions or perspectives you'd want to leave viewers with in terms of setting their own goals, overcoming barriers they may face or, hesitations they may have, and just ways in which each of the areas in which you work could play a really important role in their holistic 2022. So could we start maybe with Rachael?
Yeah, so we covered a lot of what I was sort of going to say in this closing statement. I think it's all great. This has been a really great discussion. It's given me some new ideas too. I would say, like you, Kate, I have a self-care practice that doesn't always happen. And I think a lot of it depends on sort of your life stage. I have young kids, and that always adds another layer to it. So, to just kind of, like we had said, give yourself grace with that kind of thing. Some of my favorite sort of positive psychology interventions we've talked about, 3 that I wanted to highlight, which we have touched on, are gratitude. That's a big one. One thing that I just want to add to that is not just reminding ourselves of what we're grateful for, but telling someone else, I'm grateful for you. Thank you for doing this. And it can be, thank you for starting the car for me, to your partner, or, thank you for putting your dishes in the sink. It doesn't have to be a big life-changing thing, but the act of expressing your gratitude, I think, can be very fulfilling for yourself as well as for the other person, to just hear that little bit of thanks from someone else. And then kindness, we've talked a lot about. Studies have shown, it sounds obvious, but studies have shown that happiness and kindness go hand in hand. So I think that that's a really important thing to remember. That seems like, well, I'm kind. Well, what are you doing intentionally to show that kindness? We actually had a meeting, the Council on Aging, we had a meeting with the Melrose Kind group today. And that really kind of was a perfect reminder of just little things that you can do to make someone's day that really is beneficial on both sides of it. Mm-hmm. And then the optimistic interventions, which was more about creating goals that are attainable and achievable. Like I said, use your strengths, know sort of your limitations, and be able to challenge yourself while making it realistic. So I think those are a lot of really good personal strategies. You can do it with a friend, a partner, by yourself. I think with the pandemic, we've had to turn inwards in some ways, but we've also, like we talked about, had new ways of making connections. But there can be a time when it's not enough to do your own practice. And that's when it's great to reach out to a mental health professional. You can start with something simple like a Headspace app and the Calm app. Those are 2 that I like and that I recommend often. And if that's not helpful enough, I would definitely suggest reaching out to a mental health professional. If you can't get in right away, I know that can be frustrating, and that's a big issue right now. There is BetterHelp and Talkspace are both online platforms where you actually meet face-to-face with a therapist, but it's over Zoom or whatever platform they use. One thing that I always tell people when they're thinking about reaching out to a therapist, a mental health professional, is give it some time, and it has to be the right fit. So you may go to a world-class psychologist, social worker, whatever, but it might not be the right fit for you. You might not click, and that's okay. You might have to try someone else, and that's fine. But don't get discouraged if that does happen. It's not uncommon. So I would say I would just give that as sort of an upfront warning or something to be aware of, because I think sometimes people get quickly discouraged when maybe it's just not quite the right match.
Sure.
So, and then again, if you're an older adult, reaching out to your Council on Aging, reaching out to Mystic Valley Elder Services in our area, those can be really good resources. We at the Council on Aging, City of Melrose, can help with sort of tangible things like fuel assistance, food stamps, rental assistance. It's always good to try. You may not qualify, and then we can go to Plan B, but there are a lot of resources out there for when you need it.
Thank you so much, Rachael. I appreciate sort of the continuum of supports that you've described as well, and that people should know that there are, different places along that continuum where they might fall, and along the way there are people and opportunities for, support and well-being.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachael. Michael, what about you? We'll just report out some closing thoughts and perspective.
Yeah, I mean, most of it's been said. I think, again, incorporating the arts is a great way to heal, and I hope everyone takes advantage of it. Mass cultural, well, first of all, I'm still relatively new. I'm 1 year into the job just yesterday. I'm also a new resident of the Commonwealth. And as I go around to visit all the arts organizations, I am gobsmacked and so impressed at what we have here in the Commonwealth. This state has so many organizations that are the first, the only, historic, the premier, the longest running, and it is just this wealth of experiences. You can be on the beach swimming with great white sharks and visiting artist colony in the morning, and by the evening you can be listening to an orchestra in the Berkshires with bears surrounding you. So use it, enjoy it. It's here. We have one of the best cultural sectors, I think, in the whole US. And super healing. And you don't have to be an artist or call yourself an artist to try art. Just, even go to a CVS and get a watercolor kit and just play, just have fun and see what it does for you. It's worth a try.
Thank you so much, Michael. Congratulations on your 1 year anniversary. We're really lucky to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Great. How about you, Lisa? What are some closing thoughts about, civic engagement, volunteerism, and more broadly to this conversation?
Yeah, I would just go back to saying that volunteering is an amazing way to engage with your community and sort of deepen your bonds with your community. You get to know more people and feel more connected. And research shows that feeling embedded in your community is the single most reliable predictor of happiness. So getting in there and joining in, to say a little bit of data, like studies have shown that volunteering helps ward off loneliness and depression, which obviously are so pervasive right now with the pandemic. Strong relationships between volunteering and health. Those who volunteer report higher levels of happiness, self-esteem, life satisfaction, and a sense of control over their life, greater functional ability, and lower rates of depression than those who don't volunteer. Better physical health. There was a study by Carnegie Mellon University that showed that adults over age 50 who volunteered on a regular basis were actually less likely to develop high blood pressure than non-volunteers. Neuroscientists at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke have used fMRI machines to demonstrate that altruism is deeply embedded in human nature. Their work suggests that the deep satisfaction that most people derive from altruistic behavior isn't just something that societies impose, but rather stems from the evolved architecture of the human brain. So it's a great thing to do, and it's never too late to get started. We have a bunch of grandparents who come and volunteer in our public schools regularly. And one of the grandparents I'm thinking of has a number of physical limitations, but she still goes and volunteers in the elementary library. And she just loves it. And it's a great way for her to give back and be part of that broader community. And I'd also just say, taking a more holistic viewpoint, that volunteering is also a great path towards personal and career development. I can say that I would not be in this job where I am now, which I love, and I wouldn't be here if I hadn't been a volunteer for so many years before. And if I hadn't, if I'd been afraid to dive in and take on other responsibilities in our community or give back to our community in other ways, I would not be in this job. So it's helped me build skills that I didn't, volunteering has helped me build skills that I didn't have before, as well as make a whole bunch of connections, and I've gotten to know a whole bunch of new people. And it's just a great way to give back and be happier, truly.
That's great. Thanks, Lisa. Let's turn to Debbie.
Thank you. And I actually did a little slide because they let it in So the Mystic Valley YMCA we just changed our mission to strengthen our communities with relevant, continually evolving programs and services that enrich the lives of all people in spirit, mind, and body. And I think it speaks a lot to this. You see the St. John's Triangle. That was one of the Y's original symbols with spirit, mind, and body. And it has to, that all can be one in that to enrich your life through whether it's gratitude practices or prayer or whatever you find spiritual, yoga, being around other people, and to physically and to enrich your mind, whether it's through the arts or through books you're reading, and then to enhance your body. It's all builds that triangle. And so the St. John's Triangle 1721 is all that, so that all can be one. So I think that's really important. And I think, I said, when you know one why, you know one why, but all of our whys are really committed to empowering people to reach their full potential and to really improving well-being, inspiring action, strengthening communities, ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to become healthier and more confident, connected, and secured. And I think that, the one thing that even looking at people's questions that I got was that, as people felt isolated during COVID, now's the time to be connected, whether you're connected to people, interest groups on the internet, or if you want to come and volunteer. I think that, as Lisa just said, connection and growth through volunteerism is one of the best ways. And I put how you can connect to us to volunteer. I have one gentleman who's 70 who volunteers, who has no family. His wife died. He volunteers 4 days a week. And when his psychologist asks him if he has family, he says, yes, the hundreds of people that come through every day and ask him how he is. And yes, the people, us as staff who call him when he's not there to say, hey, what's going on? Where are you? Connection's important, and we need to connect. And I want to congratulate Michael on his 1 year. And I hope that I become one of his gratitude beads. I think it's all fine if we all start at 3 and work our way up and just visualize some goals that we have, but do things we love. Because if, it's not every new year that there's actually today or yesterday was the day that most people give up their New Year's resolutions. And you won't give up your New Year's resolution if you're doing something you love. So it's not about making a life change. It's about doing things you love, whether it's, drinking more water or walking with your kids or playing an extra game or reading that book. It's doing something you love. So, I hope to see you all, and I thank you for this connection. I think that it's great you're doing this, Rep. Kate.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm glad that you could join us tonight. And how about you, Catherine?
Well, I've been taking notes because I've learned so much from everyone here tonight. And I'm hearing a lot about volunteering and connection and community. I myself volunteered. The volunteer work got me to the position where I am now. So volunteering is so useful. And it's all these things really enhance our well-being. So I would say for anybody who's listening, watching, and wants more information and is looking to find their passion or wants to make a connection, you can Google, and I did it here, library near me. There are 366 libraries in Massachusetts, and you are welcome at all of them. And they are staffed with people who will connect you to whatever you need, whatever age you are, whatever issue you have, whatever your passion is, whatever your question is. If we don't know it, that's okay, we'll find out. Libraries are some of the most fascinating, interesting people I know. Part of the reason I'm in libraries is because librarians are just so into everything and so caring. So everyone belongs in public libraries. They belong to all of us. And whether you read or if you haven't been in a library for a long time, just check out the website. The opportunities there are unbelievable, and anything you want to start, it's just a great place to start. So I highly encourage it. And I really thank you, Rep. Kate, for having us all here, because I think part of the thing many of us struggle with is communication. And when we all need money, I know that we all, everybody in the state, we all need money, and that helps us to function. But secondarily, you have these programs, you have the funding, and there are a lot of things people don't know. They don't know are available. And especially in Massachusetts, there is so much available. So ask the question and go out and find out and make those connections, because they're all available for you.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes. And I mean, this conversation has been really fascinating for me in terms of the connections that are being made between all of your incredible, presentations. I'm so grateful for your level of compassion and empathy, and even your vulnerability in some ways to share a little bit about each, who you are and what you're working on. It's just been a really wonderful hour for me personally. So I want to share contact information about each of you in case people watching would like to be in touch with any of us. And I hope everyone who's watching can take time to reflect on this community conversation. I know I certainly will. And I'll continue to think about ways to really integrate key takeaways we've heard tonight to build a meaningful new year, a healthier relationships, stronger community. We'll record this discussion and get it out soon. It'll be up on my YouTube page and on public access stations. I'm sure you all can promote it as well. It's just been a real pleasure to be with you. And to the degree that we're thinking about ways to invest in ourselves and our connections with each other, maybe all of us can get together sometime later this year or next year. Michael, you tell us when, to see the Make Way for Ducklings presentation here in Massachusetts. So again, thank you for being with us tonight, or any day that you're watching this, and look forward to continuing to be connected and work on these important topics with you. Be well.